up, everybody, and welcome back to KRSTV. This is your boy Kenny, and this is my review of this amazing series that appeared on AMC Plus back in October 2nd, and it just recently had a season finale, and I am talking about no other than the new series Interview with the Vampire. I was a big fan of the movie with Tom Cruise and Brad Pitt and Kirsten Dunst. But I must say, this series is everything. Shout out to my boy Corin Armstrong. He's the one that turned me on to this series, and he literally told me, "Oh, you're gonna love this series. It's so delicious." And he ain't never used no verbiage like that. So when he said something was delicious, I definitely took it seriously, and I watched all 7 episodes. And I must say, it is delicious. It's riveting. It's electrifying. Oh my God, this series was great. And shout out to the memory of Anne Rice, who wrote Interview with the Vampire, along with Queen of the Damned and many other books. She actually passed away during the production of the series, and I can honestly say they have truly done her justice. Her son, Chris Rice, is one of the executive producers of the series, and I must say this series is everything, and it really just brings out, the real nature of what Anne Rice wanted the story to be. Even though there were minor changes, but the subtext and the base of it is exactly the way that she wrote it. And one thing I definitely love too, that they made the character of Louis Black Creole, and it really is great because it takes place during the Jazz Age in New Orleans in the early 1900s. He meets, Lestat Leoncourt, the European who comes to America and begins his reign of control and terror. And we really see the true connection between him and Louis, like the real love connection, but it's also toxic and very gruesome at times. But we literally see how Louis, they kept the base that his grandfather ran a sugar plantation, and by the time he came of age, the family was near bankrupt, so he flips the business into the business of the day, which is, liquor, women, gambling. He literally runs all of these different whorehouses, and he's making a lot of money. He's supporting his family, in this space that he runs into Lestat. And Lestat immediately takes a liking to him, and he, in a way, lets it be known that he wants Louis in so many different ways. We also see Louis's family, his brother, who's pretty much this deranged religious fanatic who ends up committing suicide at the behest of Lestat, if you know what I'm saying. Because, he has this telepathic ability where he can get into your head and have conversations in with your mind. Lestat is one of those seasoned vampires where he has certain abilities, where he can get into your head, he can fly, he can do a lot of things. And we literally see how him and Louis' relationship really takes this romantic turn, but then it really gets very gruesome and gets very diabolical. And there are even some funny moments throughout the series too that I loved. But one of my favorite parts of the series was the introduction of Claudia. And I loved how they did Claudia. In the movie, when Kirsten Dunst played her, she was like maybe 11 or 12. They actually aged Claudia and made her a teenager at the age of 14, which gave so much to play with Claudia, because Claudia is definitely one of those draw-in characters of the series, because she's young and yet she's vicious and she's gruesome, and she has all of this teenage angst because she's 14, and even though she'll age, she will always be in the body of being 14, so she's stuck in the age of adolescence. And she's locked there. She can never have children. She can never have a normal life. So even though she has an eternal existence, her mentally and physically, she's locked in that 14-year-old space. And that being locked in a space like that, you're going to be completely off the rails. And Claudia definitely is that. And to see his interaction with Daniel Malloy, who's the interviewer, they started, I think, in 1973 in San Francisco when they first met, and let's just say things didn't go well, and Louis attacked Daniel. But now this is like 49 years later, and this is after a series of books that Anne Rice has written after the original Interview with the Vampire. So when they're doing the interview after all of these books have been written. So they're starting from a different space. At the time, Daniel Malloy in the 70s was battling drug addiction. Now he's battling Parkinson's disease, and he goes all the way to Dubai to reconvene this interview with Louis Pondelac, and now he's battling Parkinson's disease, and he literally flew during the pandemic, during the Omicron variant. So this is like in 2022, and they're like reconvening, but yet it's coming from a different place, because time has passed. Louis still looks young because he got turned into a vampire at the age of 33. So he still looks 33 years old, where now Daniel Malloy is an old man fighting Parkinson's and trying to, finally get this opportunity to finally interview him, since that was something he wanted to do back in the 70s, but things didn't go so well. So now this is his second time, but I just love their interaction with each other, because at moments they have a good back and forth, but then it'd just be funny because a lot of times, like, Louis be on that bullshit and Daniel be calling him out on it. Like when he was reading Claudia's diary and he noticed some page was missing, and this was the scene where after she gets into it with Lestat and Louis, she runs away, and Lestat warned her that there are other vampires out there, but they are very vicious and they're very cruel and they're more malicious than you could possibly imagine. And while she's out there, going to universities and all of this stuff, she meets this vampire named Bruce, who breaks her leg, but then also violates her. And like in the diary, those pages were turned out, but I think Louis himself got rid of those pages because, Claudia pretty much represented the family that he lost, because his brother Paul, who he loved dearly, committed suicide. His mother, who began to resent him, and his mother was played by the legendary Reid Chong. It was good to see her in this role. But after Paul had committed suicide, she blamed Louis for it. And their relationship was never the same. And then eventually she passes away. And then he has a younger sister who he absolutely adores. But she gets married and ends up having twins as well as a baby boy. And when he was actually holding his nephew, the urge to feed off of the baby's blood started to really creep in. And that scene was crazy because, like, when it went back to the interview, Daniel was asking, "Did you eat the baby?" And he's trying to talk about it. He's like, "Did you eat the baby? Did you eat the baby?" Like, I was cracking up because I was like, Daniel was not going to let it go. But he didn't eat his nephew. but he was close to doing it. The urge was there. And going back to the pages missing in Claudia's diary, when he kept pressing Louis about it, Louis started to fuck with his Parkinson's. And he was like, don't ask me about it again. And Daniel got so mad that he literally went up to Louis and slapped the crap out of him. I laughed so hard. I was like, these two are a mess. They still are just as combative and are just as antagonistic towards each other as they were back in the 70s. And the crazy thing about it is that they actually do a replay when they first met in this gay bar in San Francisco. The reason why Daniel was there was because he was there to score drugs. But Louis by the 70s has become comfortable in his sexuality, because in 1910, being an openly gay black man was not a reality. And I love that Anne Rice is so open with talking about, same-sex oriented love. Because historically, her and her husband had lived in San Francisco. She had a lot of gay friends. She even moved to the Castro to be close to her gay friends. So she is very loved and supported by the gay community, and she loves the gay community. And it shows in this novel because she writes so openly and so freely about homosexuality, and that it's not done in a derogatory or degrading way. It's riveting. It's exhilarating. And that's one thing I love about Anne Rice's work with Interview with a Vampire, because the movie, they kind of touched on it, but this series, they're very open and very explicit with it. Like, the homoeroticism in this is just phenomenal, and it's very tasteful how they're doing it. But yeah, I love the fact that, in 1910, you could tell Louis is battling with his sexuality. Lestat, on the other hand, is very controlling, narcissistic, and completely a sociopath. So he don't give a shit, But Louis, you could tell, is battling with his sexual orientation, back in the days of New Orleans in the early 1900s. But by the 70s, he's embraced his sexuality. He's now hanging out in gay bars, and now 2022, he's in Dubai, and he has this guy named Rashid, who's living with him, who's kind of like his partner or caretaker. But we find out that Rashid is not who he appears to be, and we later on see that Daniel starts to peep Rashid, like, yo, what's really your deal? And then the funny thing about it, he when he has a dream, when they go back to the 1970s, he realizes that Rashid was there too, and he wakes up like in a nightmare, like, what the fuck? Like, he's been here the whole time. But the thing about it, we see later on that Lestat starts to become even more malicious and becomes even more controlling. And he's very jealous. Like, he got a whole woman named Antoinette, who was a singer, that he's having an affair with all across town. But as soon as Louis gets some top from a boy from his past, he just goes into this little rant, has all these men, all these soldiers coming around singing and saying, like, well, I just decided to invite some soldiers around. I mean, it seems like you got a type. I'm like, you simple bitch. You doing all this fucking, but he gets one guy that just polishes his knob, and you got a problem with it. I mean, that's just Lestat's thing. Lestat is very controlling. He's very arrogant, very bloodthirsty, very evil, very controlling. Like, he wants everything to run to his tune, because he was the one that turned Louis into a vampire. And he also was the one who turned Claudia into one. So now, at first, you see like they kind of like this happy family. Like, you got Lestat and Louis, and Claudia is like their little girl, like their daughter. I mean, And then over the time, because she gets older, she becomes like their little sister. You know, just a interesting vampire family. But we begin to see that we begin to see that Claudia, as well as Louis, wants to get out of Lestat's control. And then there's this one scene where Lestat goes ballistic and begins to bleed the living shit out of Louis. I mean, it was like domestic violence on 100. And it was crazy. I mean, even to the point where he levitated all the way up into the sky and dropped Louis down, and Louis survived, but Louis was fucked up, and Claudia begins to hate him because he won't let her have a life. She had this one guy that she was really into, and she sucked him so bad that she killed him, and he wouldn't turn her. If anything, he made her watch the man burn, and it really pissed her off. The fact that I can't have a love, but yet you got two. Because he got Antoinette across town, and then he's playing house with Louis. So after a while, you start to see that Louis and Claudia are getting tired of Lestat's control, and they plot to get rid of him. And the way that they do it was very interesting. But then yet there's a twist. After they have this big Mardi Gras scene where they work to make Lestat the Raj of the Mardi Gras. They lure these people into their home where they have this big feast. They fast for 3 days. So they are hungry beyond comprehension. And they just ravish all of the people. And it was in there that Claudia worked her magic and was able to poison one of the people that Lestat bit, which crippled him, and therefore Louis was able to slay him. But in order to kill the vampire, you have to burn the body. They even fucked up Antoinette because he turned Antoinette into a vampire, because the irony is that Lestat can create them, but yet telepathically he can't hear them once he turns them. Once they become a vampire, he can no longer get into their heads. Because at first he was able to get into Louis' head, but after he turned Louis to a vampire, he no longer had that ability. But the thing is, Claudia and Louis could talk telepathically amongst each other. And Lestat hated that shit. So he turned Antoinette to eavesdrop on them because he can't hear them, but Antoinette could hear them. And she was going back reporting, like a secret spy. So when the whole thing went down and Antoinette revealed everything, Claudia fucked her up. And they actually killed Antoinette, but they put Lestat in a trunk for him to get thrown to the dumpster. And we know was at the dump. Rats. Because they not only can feed on humans, they can also feed on animals. And at one point, Louis didn't even want to eat humans anymore. So he was eating rats and eating cats and eating all kind of, animals or whatever. So definitely this was going to cause a rift between him and Claudia. Because here it is. Claudia wanted Lestat dead, but Louis couldn't do it because even though there was this toxic relationship that he had with Lestat, Lestat was his creator, and Lestat was the first one to really see him because when Louis was human, this man was wearing all of these different hats, had all of these, different faces he was presenting, and Lestat was the first one that saw him for who he truly was and embraced him. So there was a good moment between them, but yet it was very diabolical and it was toxic from the start. But there was a moment of love there. But after that went down, Daniel and Louis go back and forth, and Daniel's just over the bullshit. Daniel is going off. And like Rashid is trying to intervene to stop him. And then on the last episode, we get another twist in the season finale. All of a sudden, Rashid takes off his contacts, and Rashid is Middle Eastern, and he takes off his gloves, take off his contacts, kind of like taking off his earrings, like, oh bitch, you coming after my boo now, because him and Louis are companions, and then all of a sudden we see Rashid lift up. He starts to levitate and actually starts to fly, and we see his eyes have turned red. We come to find out Rashid was actually Armand in disguise. Armand, the head of the coven of vampires. And this is who Louis is with. And he finally says, Daniel Malloy, let me introduce you to the vampire Armand, the love of my life. And that's where it ended. I was like, oh shit. Man, season 2 is going to be lit. And season 2 was already, they already got the screen for season 2 before season 1 premiered. So we definitely are getting a season 2, and we're going to get a part 2 as to when now that Louis and Claudia have now left New Orleans, and they're going to travel Europe, and pretty much in the story they end up in Paris, where they meet Armand and his coven, and we're going to see how everything plays out, because we know that eventually Claudia gets killed, and how that actually happens is going to probably be unfolded in part 2. So definitely, if you have not subscribed to ANC Plus, you need to do so, and you need to do it now and catch up on season 1. These 7 episodes was everything, and I cannot wait for season 2 because it's going to be lit. So that's what I got, everybody. If you have seen it, get down in those comments. If I missed anything, get down in those comments. I'd love to hear you guys' thoughts. So until next time, everybody, take care.